Today, the United States maintains a military footprint that spans the globe, deploying mobile air bases capable of projecting force across any ocean. Behind that physical hardware lies an economic engine. Nearly 90% of all international currency transactions are conducted in US dollars, allowing Washington to set the terms of global trade. This dominance is guarded by geography. Thousands of miles of deep water insulate the American mainland on the east and west, while its immediate borders remain free from rival military superpowers. Yet Beijing is building its own global network, cutting into American market shares and expanding its presence in international waters. Curious, the current tension forces us to ask how Washington reached this level of control in the first place. To understand the approaching friction between these two heavyweights, we have to look back at how a scattered group of remote colonies transitioned from physical conquest to the subtler tools of an invisible empire. The initial phase relied entirely on physical conquest. Following Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492, European explorers arrived and systematically displaced the indigenous populations who already lived there. Over the next 2 centuries, Spain, France, and Britain rushed across the Atlantic, carving territorial claims out of the North American continent to extract its resources. By the late 1700s, Britain tightened its grip on its 13 coastal colonies, enforcing trade monopolies and heavy taxes to recoup the debts of the 7 Years' War. The colonies retaliated against this economic control. Securing military assistance from France, colonial forces broke the British Army, forcing a total surrender at Yorktown. This document shows how the young nation codified its new laws in 1788. It established a unified federal government capable of operating independently from European crowns. Severing ties with London removed the limits on American growth. The new republic absorbed the expansionist ambitions of the British Empire and prepared to wield them under its own flag. Free from British oversight, Washington immediately directed its attention westward, intent on stretching its borders across the entire landmass. This map shows the borders of the Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, the United States bought this land from France for $15 million. That single transaction tripled the nation's size, pushing the frontier deep into the continent and securing trade routes. To make these new territories profitable, the Southern economy relied on enslaved African labor to mass-produce cash crops like cotton. This reliance on slavery eventually split the country. Northern states opposed the practice, while Southern states demanded its continuation for profit, triggering a civil war. President Abraham Lincoln guided the federal government through 4 years of domestic combat, resulting in the preservation of the Union and legally abolishing slavery. The economic structures of that era left scars. Systemic racial inequalities embedded during early agricultural expansion continue to ignite civic movements in modern America. The conflict's immense toll in lives and wealth suggested that a nation's growth could not depend forever on the manual labor of an enslaved population or the constant capture of new territory. By the early 20th century, the global map was redrawn. Successive world wars leveled European empires, leaving behind a power vacuum. The 1941 attack on Pearl Harbor pulled the U.S. out of its isolation. The resulting conflict forced Washington to project its military power across both the Pacific and European theaters. Following the victory, American strategy shifted. Instead of claiming conquered land as permanent colonies, the U.S. focused on designing the rules of the international systems themselves. This photograph documents the signing of alliances like NATO. By drafting these treaties, Washington legally embedded its influence across sovereign borders. Simultaneously, they anchored the United Nations in New York, positioning a central diplomatic hub on American soil to influence international political affairs. To secure economic tethers, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank were established, ensuring that global financial stability was tied to American interests. Through these organizations, the United States transitioned into an invisible empire, capable of intervening in foreign nations without ever redrawing a border. Over 500 years, the strategy evolved from occupying indigenous lands to weaving a web of global financial and military dominance. Today, Beijing is adopting that exact historical playbook. China is rapidly expanding its own infrastructure projects and systemic influence, directly challenging American dominance. Because both nations possess nuclear capabilities, direct territorial combat has been replaced. Geopolitical friction now plays out through tariffs, sanctions, and trade wars. Physical boundaries matter far less than they once did. Modern power lies in controlling international shipping lanes, technology supply chains, and economic systems. The era of conquering land is over. The superpower that masters the invisible networks of expansion will dictate the future of global history.